Frank Miller yawned as he stared at the computer screen. The night shift at Arecibo Observatory was usually quiet. Stars didn't change much from night to night. At 52, Frank had spent half his life listening to the stars, hoping for something that never came. Until tonight. The signal appeared at 2:17 a.m. At first, Frank thought it was an error. He checked the equipment twice, then a third time. The pattern repeated every 93 seconds. Too regular for a natural phenomenon. Too complex for Earth technology. Holy shit, Frank whispered to the empty room. His fingers trembled as he called his supervisor. Within 6 hours, every major observatory on Earth confirmed the signal. Within 12, world leaders were meeting in emergency session. Within 3 days, the first part of the message was decoded. Greetings to Earth. We are the Galactic Council, a federation of 27 spacefaring civilizations. We have observed your development and invite you to join our community of worlds. People reacted in different ways. Some celebrated in the streets, some hid in bunkers, most just watched the news in stunned silence. Betty Clark was cooking dinner when she first heard. The 38-year-old diplomatic officer dropped her wooden spoon, splashing tomato sauce on her white kitchen wall. She never got around to cleaning it. 3 days later, she was summoned to Washington. "You want me to talk to aliens?" Betty asked, looking around the Pentagon conference room at 12 serious-faced officials. "Your background is unique, Miss Clark," said General Harris. "Degrees in linguistics and game theory, 5 years in diplomatic services, 3 years in crisis negotiation. Plus," added a woman Betty didn't recognize, "you're known for thinking outside the box." The United Earth Coalition formed within weeks. Old enemies set aside differences in the face of something much bigger than their ancient fights. Betty was named Chief Communication Officer for the First Earth Delegation. The next 6 months passed in a blur. Teams of scientists and linguists worked around the clock to communicate with the Council. They learned the basics of 7 alien languages and received coordinates for a meeting point near Jupiter. On September 15, 2039, the newly constructed U.S. Horizon, Earth's first faster-than-light vessel built with instructions from the Council, prepared for departure. The ship carried 35 representatives from Earth's nations, religions, and scientific fields. Betty stood on the observation deck, watching Earth shrink into a blue marble. "Scared?" asked a voice behind her. She turned to see Steve Daniels, a former Navy SEAL selected as security chief. "Terrified," Betty admitted. "You?" Steve shrugged. "I've made peace with dying. I'm more worried about saying the wrong thing and starting an interstellar war." Betty laughed despite herself. "That's my job to prevent." The journey took 3 weeks by Earth time. When they arrived at Harmony 7, the Council's neutral space station, Betty's first thought was that it looked like a giant silver sea urchin, spikes extending in all directions. The first meeting with the Council representatives went better than expected. The aliens were diverse beyond imagination. The Zoraks resembled tall, thin lizards with 4 arms. The Pleiades looked almost human except for their silver skin and lack of visible mouths. The Flaxians were plant-based beings that communicated through colored pollen. Frank Miller, invited as the astronomer who discovered the signal, whispered to Betty, "I feel like I'm dreaming." "If you are, we're having the same dream," Betty replied. The Zorak's elder, Sithel, welcomed them formally. "Humans join us at an important time. The galaxy faces challenges that require fresh perspectives." Later, in their private quarters, Steve pulled Betty aside. "Did you notice how the smaller species only spoke when the Zoraks nodded at them? And how the Pleiades representatives were recording everything?" Betty nodded. "This isn't just a friendly club. There's politics here, power dynamics. So just like Earth, but with tentacles," Steve said dryly. Betty smiled, but her mind was already racing, analyzing every interaction. Earth had been invited to the table, but she sensed they were expected to know their place. At the bottom. "We'll see about that," she murmured to herself. The Earth delegation settled into their quarters on Harmony 7. The rooms were designed for various alien bodies, not humans. The beds were too long, the chairs too high, and the air slightly thinner than Earth's. But humans did what they always did. They adapted. Betty spent her nights studying council protocols and her days observing alien interactions. She noticed how the ancient Zoracs used subtle threats and historical references to maintain control. Meanwhile, the Pleiades, with their vast trading networks, quietly bought influence. They expect us to be overwhelmed, Betty told Steve as they shared a meal in the Earth section. They've given us observer status. We're supposed to sit quietly for decades, grateful to be included. Steve nodded. The other newcomers, the Trills, have been observers for 60 years. They still can't vote. We need to be different, Betty said. And different they were. During the third council session, when the Zoracs representative complained about translation issues, Betty stood up and addressed him in perfect Zorac speech patterns. The chamber fell silent. "How is this possible?" asked Elder Xithel, his scales changing from green to a surprise blue. "You've been here only 26 days. Humans learn quickly when motivated," Betty replied with a respectful bow. By the end of the first month, Betty had basic conversation skills in 6 alien languages. Other human delegates showed similar adaptability. Joe Harris, an engineer, fixed the station's water recycling system that had been malfunctioning for years. Lisa Brown figured out how to grow Earth tomatoes in alien soil, creating a new delicacy that many species enjoyed. The most surprising reaction came from the Council's security forces. When Steve Daniels walked into a training session, the alien guards stared in disbelief. "Your protective equipment is minimal," said Kren, the head of security. He was from a species called the Durans, with thick armor-like skin and powerful limbs. Steve shrugged. Humans rely more on movement than protection. When Steve volunteered for a training exercise, the Durans thought it would be a quick demonstration of their superiority. Instead, Steve's quick reflexes and unpredictable fighting style left 3 Duran guards on the floor. "Impossible," Kren said. "Your species has no natural armor, no claws, no venom. We make do with what we have," Steve replied simply. Word spread quickly through the station. Humans were not what the Council expected. They were supposed to be primitive, slow to adapt, and easily controlled. Instead, they were learning, observing, and quietly proving their worth. During a private dinner with representatives from smaller species, Betty learned more about council politics. The Flaxians, plant-like beings who rarely spoke in full sessions, were surprisingly talkative. "The council wasn't always like this," explained Pol, a Flaxian elder whose leaves shimmered with golden pollen. "Once all species had equal voice. The Zoracs changed everything when they defeated the Makari in the Great War 3 centuries ago." "And the Pleiades?" Betty asked. "They were once traders only," Pol said. "Now they control most resource-rich planets through complex contracts many species cannot understand." After 3 months on Harmony 7, the human delegation was called to a special session. Elder Xithel addressed them formally. "Humans have shown surprising qualities," he said, his voice carrying a tone Betty recognized as reluctant admiration. "The Council has voted to grant Earth limited speaking rights in certain committees. This is an honor not given to any species so quickly before." Later, in the Earth section, the delegation celebrated this small victory. But Frank Miller remained thoughtful. "They're watching us carefully," he said to Betty. "Did you notice how the Pleiades representatives were taking notes on everything we said?" Betty nodded. "They're trying to figure us out." "And when they do?" Steve asked. Betty looked at her colleagues. "By then, we'll already have changed the game." 5 years passed. What began as a small Earth delegation of 35 grew to over 200 humans working throughout Harmony 7 and beyond. Humans were no longer visitors but essential parts of daily council operations. Jack Peterson didn't look important. At 32, The junior diplomat had a plain face easy to forget, but Jack had a gift for logistics that changed everything. "This supply route makes no sense," Jack said during his first week working in the Council's resource division. He pointed at star charts showing how medical supplies moved between worlds. "Why go around this nebula when you can go through the safe corridor here? It would save 14 days. The Pleiades manager fluttered her silver fingers dismissively. "That route has been established for 300 years. It is tradition." Jack smiled politely. "Can I run some tests with a small shipment?" 1 month later, Jack's new routes had cut delivery times in half. 6 months later, he reorganized the entire Council supply system. Critical medicine reached outer worlds faster. Food stayed fresher. Costs dropped. Species that had suffered for centuries suddenly received reliable supplies. Jack wasn't the only human making changes. In the Council's engineering corps, Susan Lee solved a gravity problem that had plagued station designers for generations. Her solution wasn't complex. It was simple. "Sometimes you don't need quantum physics," Susan explained to amazed alien engineers. "Sometimes you just need a counterweight." The Zorax watched these developments with growing concern. In a private chamber, Elder Xithel met with Vex, leader of the Pleiades Commerce Guild. "Humans advance too quickly," Xithel said, his scales darkening with worry. "In 5 years, they've gained influence it took the Trills 60 years to achieve." Vex nodded, her featureless face impossible to read. "More concerning is how the smaller species look to humans first now, not to us. The Flaxians especially have grown independent." On the station's garden level, Betty Clark, now Earth's senior representative, walked with Pole of the Flaxians. 5 years had added gray to Betty's hair and confidence to her step. "Your people have changed things," Pole said, his leaves releasing happy yellow pollen. "Before humans, my people went hungry when shipments were delayed. The Zorax called it unfortunate, but did nothing. Now we haven't missed a supply drop in 3 years. We just fixed a few inefficient systems," Betty said modestly. "You did more than that," Pole replied. "You showed that things can change, that the strong don't always have to dominate the weak." In the station's central hub, Steve Daniels, now head of the Joint Human-Alien Security Team, watched humans and aliens working together. Humans handled jobs requiring quick decisions, while aliens with natural armor took positions needing physical strength. Together, they were more effective than either had been alone. Frank Miller, whose discovery had started everything, now ran the station's observatory. He'd built relationships with scientists from 20 different species. Together, they made discoveries no single species could have achieved alone. The Council was changing. At meetings, smaller species now spoke up. When the Zorax tried to silence them, they would say, "The humans listen to our ideas. Why won't you?" Not everyone was happy with these changes. The Durans, once the unquestioned security force, resented sharing power. The Pleiades saw their economic control weakening as humans introduced simpler contracts any species could understand. Jack Peterson noticed the tension first. During a routine supply meeting, the Pleiades representative refused to approve his latest efficiency plan. "We must study this further," the representative said coldly. "Perhaps for several years." Later, Jack told Betty about the incident. "Something's changing. They're pushing back." Betty nodded. "I felt it too. The Zorax barely hide their anger now when humans speak in council." "What do we do?" Jack asked. "Keep doing what we've been doing," Betty replied. "The council needs us more than they want to admit." She didn't know how soon that theory would be tested. The council chamber fell silent as Elder Xithel finished speaking. His proposal hung in the air like a storm cloud. Betty Clark felt her heart pound as she looked around at the alien faces. Some showed shock, others seemed pleased, but most were carefully neutral. "To summarize," Xithel said, his scales a confident green, "the Council proposes new guidelines for developing species. Earth will place 40% of its resources under Council management. Earth will also accept Zorak's military bases for its protection. Protection from what? Betty asked, keeping her voice calm despite her anger. The galaxy is dangerous. Sithel replied smoothly. Many threats exist beyond Council space. Linda Walsh, who had replaced Betty as Earth's senior ambassador, stood to address the Council. At 60, Linda had spent decades in diplomatic service before the first contact. Fellow Council members, Linda began, Earth has contributed greatly these past 5 years. We've improved supply lines, developed new medicines, and fostered cooperation. We've earned our place here as equals, not as a protected colony. The Pleiades representative rose next. Humans advance quickly, yes, but untested species require guidance. This is for Earth's benefit. Linda spoke for nearly an hour, reminding the Council of human contributions. She appealed to fairness, cooperation, and mutual respect. Several smaller species nodded in agreement. But when the vote came, the results were clear. The proposal passed 16 to 11, with the Zoraks, Pleiades, and their allied species forming the majority. After the session, the Earth delegation gathered in their private meeting room. The atmosphere was heavy with disbelief and anger. They want to turn Earth into a resource farm, Jack Peterson said, pacing the room. And they're using protection as an excuse to put military bases in our solar system. Linda nodded grimly. Many developing worlds accepted similar terms. The Trills, the Viridians, their resources are drained while they receive little in return. We have 72 hours to respond, Betty reminded them. If we refuse, we'll lose our council membership, Steve finished. Everything we've built here will be gone. A message arrived from Earth. President Alan Wright and the United Earth Coalition had been informed of the Council's demands. They wanted to speak with the delegation immediately. The video conference lasted 5 hours. Earth leaders debated, argued, and considered every option. Some thought accepting the terms was safer than isolation. Others believed it would lead to Earth becoming another exploited world. Finally, President Wright made the decision. We came to the Council as equals, he said, his face serious on the screen. We will not accept less than that. If the Council won't treat us as partners, then perhaps it's time to show them what they'll lose without us. The next morning, Linda Walsh requested an emergency council session. The chamber buzzed with speculation as the full Earth delegation entered. It was unusual to see all human representatives together. Even Frank Miller and Susan Lee, who rarely attended political meetings, were present. Linda took her place at the speaker's podium. Her voice was clear and carried throughout the chamber. The United Earth Coalition has carefully considered the Council's proposal, she began. For 5 years, humans have worked alongside you. We've shared our ideas, our labor, and our friendship. We've improved lives across many worlds. She paused, meeting the eyes of various representatives. But we cannot accept terms that make us less than equals. We cannot allow 40% of Earth's resources to be controlled by others. We cannot accept foreign military bases in our home system. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Elder Xithel's scales flashed warning red. This is not a negotiation, he said sharply. The Council has voted. Linda nodded calmly. Yes, and Earth has decided. If these are your terms, then with great regret, all human representatives will withdraw from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. No one had expected this. The smaller species looked alarmed. The Zoraks and Pleiades seemed stunned. They had expected Earth to give in, as other worlds had before. They were wrong. The news spread through Harmony 7 like wildfire. Humans were leaving. All 200 of them. The station buzzed with disbelief as human representatives packed their belongings and prepared their ships for departure. In the Earth section, Betty supervised the evacuation. Crew members carefully removed human technology, packed personal items, and backed up important data. The mood was somber but determined. Are we really doing this? Frank Miller asked Betty as they packed the science lab. Leaving everything we've built here. Betty nodded. Sometimes you have to walk away to make a point. Outside their quarters, aliens gathered in the corridors. Some came to protest, others to say goodbye. Many of the smaller species looked worried. Pole of the Flaxians approached Betty, his leaves drooping in distress. Without humans, who will ensure fair distribution of supplies, my people may starve again. I'm sorry, Pole, Betty said gently. We can't stay on these terms, but this doesn't have to be forever. In the council chamber, an emergency session had been called. Elder Xithel addressed the representatives, his scales a confident blue. The human reaction is unfortunate, but not unexpected. Developing species often display emotional responses to reasonable oversight. A small, rarely heard voice interrupted him. It was Mick, representative of the Viridians, a species that had accepted similar terms centuries ago. Is it reasonable? Mick asked, his large eyes blinking slowly. My world gave 40% of our resources 50 years ago. We are poorer now than before we joined the council. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Other small species began to speak up. The humans fixed our water system, said the Trill's representative. They taught us simplified engineering that doesn't require expensive Pleiades technology, added another. The Pleiades representative rose, her silver skin gleaming under the chamber lights. These are temporary inconveniences. New arrangements will be made. The council functioned before humans, and will function after. At the main docking bay, the human ships prepared for departure. Linda Walsh stood before the gathered representatives for a final statement. We came as friends and partners, she said. We hope to learn from you and share what we know. We still hope for that future, but we cannot accept being treated as lesser beings. Virene of the Erosians, an elder respected by all council species, pushed through the crowd. His ancient body moved slowly, supported by a hovering chair. Please reconsider, the old alien said. The council can vote again. Compromises can be found. Linda shook her head sadly. The vote showed us where we stand. If the council changes its mind, Earth will listen. Until then, we must withdraw. Steve Daniels, who had trained many of the station's security personnel, found himself surrounded by his alien students. Who will lead our combat drills? Asked Kren of the Durans. The alien warrior who had once resented human methods now looked genuinely concerned. You've learned enough to continue without me, Steve said, gripping the alien's arm in farewell. Jack Peterson faced the hardest goodbyes. The supply managers he had trained watched in silence as he handed over his access codes. The new shipping routes are all documented, Jack explained. Just follow the systems we created. One by one, the human ships departed from Harmony 7. The last vessel carried Betty, Linda, Steve, and the senior staff. As they prepared to leave, Betty placed a small communication device on the docking bay console. What's that? Asked the Zordax official overseeing their departure. A direct line to Earth, Betty explained. It will activate when you're ready to talk as equals. The ship's doors close. The final human vessel pulled away from the station. Inside the council chamber, many representatives watched on the large viewing screen. They'd really left, whispered one of the younger Zorax to Elder Xithel. The elder's scales had turned an uncertain gray. They'll be back when they realize how isolated they are. But even as he spoke, the first alarming reports were coming in from station operations. 3 days after the humans left, the first major system failed on Harmony 7. The water recycling plant that Joe Harris had maintained stopped working. Alien engineers tried to fix it using old manuals, but the system had been modified too much by human hands. We need more time, the head engineer told the council. The humans changed everything. They left notes, but their writing is different. They think differently. By the end of the first week, 4 more systems showed problems. The supply chain Jack Peterson had reorganized began falling apart. Ships arrived at the wrong times. Cargo sat unloaded. Smaller worlds reported missing deliveries. In the council chamber, Elder Xithel faced angry representatives. "My people have not received medicine for 6 days," the Flaxian representative said, his pollen turning dark red with distress. "Before the humans left, we never missed a shipment." The Pleiades tried to step in. They offered their own engineers and supply managers at high prices, but the Pleiades experts were used to complex solutions. They couldn't understand the simple, practical fixes humans had created. "These human systems are primitive, but strangely effective," admitted a frustrated Pleiades engineer. "They use basic parts that can be replaced anywhere. Our technology is more advanced, but requires specific components only we manufacture." Meanwhile, Earth wasn't sitting idle. Captain Paul Martins of the Earth vessel Star Voyager made contact with 17 independent worlds outside Council space. These were planets the Council had deemed too primitive for membership. "Earth offers fair trade," Paul told the leaders of these worlds. "We want partners, not subjects." Within a month, the Free Trade Initiative formed. Earth ships began moving supplies between these independent worlds. Unlike the Council, Earth asked for equal exchange, not control. The Flaxians were the first Council species to break ranks. When their medical supplies ran out, they sent a secret message to Earth. "We need help," Paul told Betty Clark over a secure channel. "Our children are sick. The Council solutions aren't working." Betty didn't hesitate. "We'll send medicine. No political strings attached." The Zorax discovered the unauthorized trade and were furious. They called an emergency council session to punish the Flaxians. "Trading with non-council worlds is forbidden without approval," Elder Xithel declared, his scales bright red with anger. But when the vote came, 7 other species sided with the Flaxians. The old power balance was shifting. 2 months after humans left, the first major crisis hit. A dispute between the Durans and the Erosians over a shared mining moon turned violent. In the past, human mediators had helped settle such conflicts. Now, with no neutral party to step in, fighting broke out. The Council Security Force, once trained by Steve Daniels, struggled to maintain order. Their coordinated tactics fell apart without regular human-led drills. Elder Xithel and the Pleiades leader Vex met privately to discuss the growing problems. "We must admit the situation is worse than expected," Vex said, her silver face unreadable, but her voice concerned. "Station efficiency has dropped 62%. Trade disputes have increased. 3 more species are threatening to leave the Council." Xithel's scales had permanently turned a worried gray. "The humans left us with half-finished systems we don't fully understand." They knew what would happen. "Perhaps," Vex suggested carefully, "we should consider new terms." Xithel hissed in frustration. "The mighty Zorax do not beg lesser species to return." But that same day, another system failed, plunging half the station into darkness. As emergency lights flickered on, a junior Zorax aide approached Elder Xithel. "Elder, the communications device the humans left. It's blinking." From across the station, aliens from various species watched the silent, blinking light. No one moved to answer it. Not yet. 6 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council was in disarray. The situation had moved beyond inconvenience into genuine crisis. Systems continued to fail across Harmony 7. Trade between worlds slowed to a trickle. Food shortages affected 12 planets. Most alarming was the outbreak of civil war in 2 council systems. The Durans and Erosians, once kept in check by human mediators, now fought openly over resource-rich moons they both claimed. Their conflict spread to neighboring systems as allies joined both sides. The council chamber, once a place of orderly debate, now echoed with shouting matches and threats. Elder Xithel struggled to maintain control as more species openly questioned Zorax leadership. "Your promises of protection mean nothing," the Trill representative said bitterly. "Our colony on Vega 9 was caught in Duran erosion crossfire. 2,000 dead, and the Council did nothing." The refugee crisis overwhelmed everyone. Millions flood the conflict zones, seeking safety on other worlds. Council systems designed to handle small migrations couldn't cope with these numbers. On Earth, leaders watched these developments with mixed feelings. They took no pleasure in the suffering, but they had predicted this outcome. The Council was built on control, not cooperation, President Alan Wright told his advisors. Without humans to patch the cracks, the whole structure is breaking apart. Dr. Samantha Lewis, head of Earth's medical corps, couldn't stand by watching the humanitarian disaster unfold. She approached the Earth leadership with a bold proposal. "Let me take 3 ships with medical supplies," Samantha urged. Not to the Council, but directly to the refugee camps. 1 month after the Council's vote, human ships returned to Harmony 7. This time, they arrived not as visitors or observers, but as full founding members with equal status to the Zorax and Pleiades. Betty Clark led the delegation, now serving as Earth's senior ambassador. The station looked different from when they had left. Repairs were half finished. Corridors were dimly lit to save power. Many areas remained closed due to system failures. In the Grand Council chamber, representatives from all species gathered for the historic session. The room buzzed with anticipation as Betty took the podium. "Earth accepts the Council's invitation to return," Betty announced. "But we have 3 simple conditions." Elder Xithel's scales shifted nervously as Betty continued. "First, all species will have equal voting rights, regardless of how long they've been Council members." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The smaller species looked hopeful, while some older members shifted uncomfortably. Second, Council headquarters will be relocated to a new neutral station, jointly built by all members. The Zorax delegation whispered among themselves. Harmony 7 had been their territory for centuries. Third, a new galactic charter will be drafted, with input from all species, to replace the current rules. Betty paused, looking around the room. "These are our terms. We believe they will create a stronger, fairer council for everyone." To the surprise of many, Elder Xithel was the first to stand in support. His scales had turned a calm blue, a color rarely seen on the usually dominant Zorax. "The past months have taught us hard lessons," he said. "The old ways failed us all. The Zorax support these terms." The vote was unanimous. Even the Pleiades, sensing the shifting winds, voted in favor. The next year brought rapid change. Construction began on Unity Station, a new headquarters built by engineers from all species. Human designers worked alongside alien architects, creating a space where all could feel at home. Betty spent months helping draft the new Galactic Charter. Unlike the old rules, written in complex language that favored the Zorax and Pleiades, the new charter was clear and simple. All species could understand their rights and responsibilities. The supply systems Jack Peterson had created were restored and improved. Medical aid reached outer worlds faster than ever. The Duran erosion conflict ended through careful mediation, led by both human and alien diplomats working together. Most significant was the change in how species treated each other. Under the new rules, the Trills finally received full member status after waiting for decades. The Flaxians, once considered too primitive for important roles, now led the Council's Agricultural Committee. On the day Unity Station officially opened, Greg Wilson, a human engineer, led a multi-species team in the groundbreaking ceremony for the Galactic Cooperative University. "This university will belong to all of us," Greg told the gathered crowd. "Here, all species will share knowledge equally. No technology will be kept secret. No species will be left behind." Frank Miller, now elderly but still sharp-minded, watched the ceremony with tears in his eyes. Betty stood beside him. "Who would have thought that discovering a signal would lead to all this?" Frank said softly. Betty smiled. "The funny thing is, the Council thought humans were special because of our technology. But that wasn't it at all." "What was it then?" Frank asked. "Our willingness to walk away rather than accept unfair treatment," Betty replied. "And our ability to come back without seeking revenge." A century later, alien children gathered around their teacher on a distant world. On the classroom wall hung images of the old Harmony 7 station and the newer Unity station. And that is how the great rebalancing happened, the teacher explained. Humans weren't exceptional because they were stronger or smarter than other species. They were exceptional because they showed the galaxy a different way to live together. A small alien child raised a tentacle. Teacher, is this story really true? The teacher smiled. Yes, little one. Sometimes the most important revolutions happen not with weapons, but when someone simply decides to walk away.